you want to try this, we put this on the inverter, these lights. I don't know if it can take the load, that's the only worry. You tried? Oh, this is back. Sri Aurobindo is describing the functioning of our senses from a deeper and higher perspective. We have seen that our senses are not primarily biological, and the true foundation of sense is essentially in the contact of the mind with an object. Even we saw Sri Aurobindo's description in the Synthesis of Yoga, where he speaks of all sense being essentially contact of consciousness with consciousness. And here we are looking at how this perception of the mind is functioning in its deeper operations, and in what way they are related to the supermind. The lower part we have seen, the physical senses are only a mechanism by which a contact of consciousness on a material level is translated into an image, an eidolon, perhaps even a false image, then translated by life energy into another image, and then translated into mind. But now the whole functioning of the senses is being observed in the domain of the mind. And here he says something very important, which we have read last time briefly, but now we will explore more deeply. Mind, in fact, or active consciousness generally, has 4 necessary functions which are indispensable to it. So, although we are looking at it in the domain of mind, he is extending this discussion to the full spectrum of consciousness, wherever there is active consciousness. And active consciousness means it enters in action in relation with something else, consciousness, other consciousness. So wherever consciousness reaches out to enter in relation to consciousness, and there is some action, some activity of consciousness, there are 4 necessary functions without which that kind of action of consciousness is impossible. These four necessary functions are indispensable to it, wherever and however it may act. And so it's a very general statement, and these four functions are operative everywhere in consciousness, although our immediate study will be in the domain of the mind and its functions, of which the Upanishad speaks in the four terms Vijnana, Prajnana, Samjnana, and Ajnana. Now, these are four technical terms. If you explore Sri Aurobindo's other writings, you find him referring to these terms also in his commentaries on the Veda, in the book Secret of the Veda, where he takes certain texts from the Vedic suktas, and then elaborates on them, draws out their deeper psychological and spiritual sense. And there you find some discussion also of the operations of Vijnana and Prajnana in the working of the deity, Usha, dawn, the consciousness illuminating, dawning, awakening knowledge. So here he gives us a quick summary of these four functions and then describes how it works in the mind and how it works in the supermind. Last time we dwelt extensively on the first of these, Vijnana. Vijnana is the original comprehensive consciousness which holds an image of things at once in its essence, its totality, and its parts and properties. All four levels simultaneously are held. The word itself, he uses the word comprehensive consciousness, the original comprehensive consciousness. That is the consciousness of comprehension in its origin, in its highest station. Now, comprehension in the root sense indicates in something in this direction. Comprehend, take in, grasp, hold, completely. So completely hold, completely grasp, that is the sense of comprehend. And so Sri Aurobindo uses this word to describe Vijnana. Holds an image of things at once in its essence, its totality, its parts and properties. So there is a complete holding of all four levels simultaneously as a single fourfold experience. We discussed this last time in some detail, so we don't repeat now. He describes this as it is the original, spontaneous, true and complete view of it, which belongs properly to the supermind, and of which mind has only a shadow in the highest operations of the comprehensive intellect. So the mind is able to have an experience of comprehension, but its highest operation of comprehension is still only a shadow compared to what is the true functioning in supermind. And we saw why, we saw how. For supermind, when it knows something, it is not holding an image of something, it is holding the thing itself, unlike intellect, which must create an image inside us. What is flower? Well, we have to create a concept of flower in our mind, and that's what we know. We never truly know the flowerness of the flower itself. Supermind knows flowerness of flower in its origin, from where the whole expression of flower and its organization in evolution and in form, in material form, as well as in conceptual form, has originated. And at that level, supermind knows it in itself intimately by identity. And therefore, it is the original, spontaneous, because it knows effortlessly without going through a process. True, because it knows the thing itself, not an image of it. And complete view, because it knows the totality of its expression all through. And so, from there, if we compare to the mind's grasp of idea of flower, you can see how it is only a pale shadow in its highest operation of comprehensive intellect. But still, there is an equivalent action in the mind of comprehension. Now we dwell upon the next three and try to understand them also as deeply as we went in the first. Prajnana is the consciousness which holds an image of things before it as an object, with which it has to enter into relations and to possess by apprehension and a combined analytic and synthetic cognition. So this is now prajnana we take up. Vijnana we saw the original comprehensive consciousness. Prajnana is not comprehending at all. The essence of prajnana is putting in front and entering in relation, reaching out to grasp. So prajnana is the consciousness which holds an image of things before it as an object with which it has to enter into relations. Sri Aurobindo gives a very beautiful example in the Life Divine of the working of prajnana. He is discussing in its highest operation, because all four operations exist on all levels of consciousness, not only in the intellect, not only a writer of a novel who puts his creation before him as an object. Now imagine you are imagining a novel, a story. In your mind, you've created the circumstances, perhaps the players. Where are they? In your mind. What are they made of? Substance of your mind. Who's looking at them? You yourself. But you have two levels of experience of looking at them. One is inside, where you're one with the thing. I am this character who will enter into this heroic action. And then at the same time, I have a second way of looking at it. I step out of the character. Now I look at this character along with other characters in the plot of the story. And I separate myself as an observer. I place these things as an object of observation. So this is the consciousness which holds an image of things before it as an object and with which it has to enter into relations. Now the same character with whom I was identified from inside, I have placed before me. And I've put other characters also with whom I was identified from inside before me. I rearrange their relationships, their actions, the timeline of the events. And then I, as the writer, re-enter in relation with them. I lean into them to reach out and grasp and draw them to myself once again. The whole novel, objectivized, now is taken back into me. And how? The mechanism for that has to enter into relation and to possess by apprehension and a combined analytic and synthetic cognition. So the whole description is very precise. First, you have to apprehend. And again, the root of the word apprehend, comprehend, apprehend. You see, prehend is common. The prehend is grasping. Comprehend was completely grasping. Apprehend is reaching out to grasp. So in the app, there is a reaching out and then grasping. And then subsequently in the samjnana function, there will be a drawing in into substance. But first there is a reaching out to grasp, that is apprehension. So my mind now takes all these characters which I knew intimately, objectivizes them, and then now reaches out to grasp the totality of the novel and take it back. But the contact of consciousness with the image is done first by this apprehending process, and then a combined analytic and synthetic cognition. Now when I draw back this novel, I have to observe all the distinctions between these different people who will play out their parts. Each one's perspective I have to hold now separately, Remember, the hero, protagonist of this novel, he is doing things with good intention, but there is somebody, the antagonist, who has bad intention. And the relationship of the good intention and the bad intention is complex. When I enter identification with the protagonist and see the good intention, I see the bad intention from outside, and I don't understand why that man wants to hate me. On the other hand, when I identify with the antagonist and I experience his bad intention, his ill will towards the good protagonist, I understand why he hates the protagonist, why he feels jealous, why he is afraid. But now, when I bring the two together, I am separate from both. And I must put them both in a right relation to each other by separating what is different and then combining to bring together the different things. There's an analysis, separation of the parts and the different viewpoints, and then a synthesis, a drawing together of them, making them fit in some way until the whole is held in a complete picture. So there's separation of distinctions and then a joining together of the pieces which have been distinguished into one big picture. Analysis and then synthesis. So in the mind, this is what we do. Somebody, and we have all done it perhaps in our school days, write a critique of this novel. So rather than simply reading it, enjoying the identification with the parts, we have now to stand back and place all these parts before us, all these roles, and then observe, oh, this person, he is good, but he is naive. That person, he seems to be bad, but actually he is only weak and fearful. And so the arrangement in which the sequence in which the events have been laid out are masterfully presented, because we do not know till the end what will happen. All options are left open. And so we analyze the functions. We analyze the way the characters are laid out, played out, and revealed to us. But we put it all together in one big picture. And in the big picture, it is a fascinating novel. There's a series of layers of revelation, of surprises at each step. And each time we think we have now understood the plot, there's something new which emerges, which we did not foresee. And so there's a complete picture now presented of the totality of the novel and why it is enjoyable, what makes it special, and the writer's special skill which is common throughout. So you see here the analysis, the distinctions of parts, and then the synthesis, the common features now placed in totality, in alignment. And this is the mechanism by which we are able to apprehend that which was put before us objectively as a separate object, as a separate image. This is how the mind works. But in the Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo describes how the self does exactly this. It experiences everything within in identity, but then it puts that before it by this power of prajnana, objectivizes to itself all of its infinite possibilities. And in thus objectivizing by the power of prajnana, it creates the separation of the Purusha and Prakriti, observing consciousness and the energy of expression. It, by the same process, objectivizes creation and stands back as the witness and support of creation. And so this whole process of prajnana, Sri Aurobindo describes, is the origin of division of consciousness and eventually even of ignorance. So essence of prajnana is this putting objectively in separation before us. Now in our mind, we don't start by putting objectively, we start by being trapped into the objectivity. We are not even trying to do it. The whole universe stands before us as something separate from us. And now with my mind, I look at the universe, and prajnana holds this image of things before it as an object with which it is required to enter into relation and to possess by apprehension. And so the function now of prajnana is reaching out to grasp, to know, to hold, and using this combined analytic and synthetic cognition. What is this new thing? Oh, what are the different parts that make it? How do these parts function together? So I first synthesized to make the distinct parts, and then I've analyzed to make the distinct parts, and then synthesized to see how they function together. And at that point, I say, now I know what this is. So this is power of prajnana. The third is samjnana. Samjnana is the contact of consciousness with an image of things by which there is a sensible position of it in its substance. You're making contact and you possess it as if by sensation, as if holding it in substance. Now, if you observe the relationship of prajnana and samjnana, prajnana was trying to grasp, but its action is not complete unless by samjnana the grasping is brought in and there is complete possession in substance. Now I feel one with it. That's when I say, I've got the idea. So you notice how, let's take an example of a new vehicle. Let's say the first time you have seen a car. Oh, what is this device? It is used for moving around. How does it work? And so I need to open the bonnet, look inside, there's an engine, and then there is this belt which drives, there's a shaft, there's a universal joint which converts the rotation to the wheels, there are brakes, and so on. I break it up into pieces. I join them, I see it working, I switch it on, I watch the whole thing working in its unity. And as I'm doing all this, observe subconsciously, I'm as if absorbing, identifying. A part of my consciousness is taking it in and making it a part of myself until at some point I grasp the whole of the car experience and I say, now I understand how it works. This power is the samjnana. And Sri Aurobindo explains this. If prajnana can be described as the outgoing of apprehensive consciousness to possess its object in conscious energy, to know it, samjnana can be described as the inbringing movement of apprehensive consciousness, which draws the object placed before it back to itself, so as to possess it in conscious substance, to feel it. Common to both is this term apprehensive consciousness, apprehension. But apprehension has this dual function, reaching out to grasp and then bringing back inside until you possess it in substance and feel it. When you start driving a car or riding a moped or riding a bicycle, there is an initial phase of prajnana where it is an object separate from you. What is this bicycle? I'm scared. Will I lose balance? I have seen people riding it. How do they manage to get the balance? My friend rides while singing, looking up at the sky. He can leave his hands and the whole thing stays in balance. Oh, it is so scary. How will I learn to balance? The whole experience of balancing a cycle is objectivized, separate from you. I then sit on the cycle, and as I'm sitting on it, I learn, oh, I have the pedals, I have the brakes, I have the lights, I have the handle to move, and somehow I have to coordinate these different functions. I have to move my hands, move my legs, and not look away or look in front. So you have done the analytic part, and in the synthesis, you will see the drawing in together in a single experience. And at some point, there's a breakthrough. Suddenly, you get the balance. And you get the balance, you notice when you cease to feel the cycle as separate from you. It becomes a part of you, an extension of you, and the riding experience, the balancing of the cycle itself is your consciousness. And at that point it happens. And if you try to analyze how do you balance, what do you actually do to balance, you lose the balance. And initially you try, how did I do it? And you lose it. At some point you give up trying. So many people have spent their whole lives getting the perfect balance without ever thinking about it. But if you had to understand how the balance capacity functions, you would have to objectivize again. You have to, this process of some jnana where you identified and became one with it in substance has to be broken. You have to objectivize what you are doing, and you observe that when you start falling to the right, you turn to the right, which is counterintuitive. When you try to apply your intellect and you notice when you start falling to the right, you try to turn left, but that's wrong. You allow it to turn right. You allow the handle to flow with the movement of the bicycle. And at that point, everything happens automatically. Once you realize this, you can actually let go of the handle. Again, you have taken in the consciousness. Now, the detail which you did not consciously know, you objectivized, grasped the detail, and indrew it by the power of samjnana. And now you can let go of the handle. And with a slight movement of your hips, make the handle swing, and you have the balance of the cycle without losing it. If you observe the whole process, there is constantly this prajnana and samjnana functioning taking place. Objectivizing, grasping to take in analytic synthetically, and then drawing in by samjnana. The contact of consciousness with an image of things by which there is a sensible possession of it in its substance. The inbringing movement of apprehensive consciousness which draws the object placed before it back to itself so as to possess it in its conscious substance, to feel it in substance. So the samjnana is the feeling in substance by drawing in. Now, in the functioning of the mind, in all knowledge, there is this apprehensive movement to reach out to grasp, and then the apprehensive movement to draw in to feel substance. And we are doing this constantly, unconsciously, automatically. But when you become conscious of it, you can actually amplify the process or make it happen more deeply, more completely. And you can see these two are almost complementary. And to our intellect, they happen almost automatically. And Sri Aurobindo will comment on this later. The fourth function is ajnana. Ajnana is the operation by which consciousness dwells on an image of things so as to hold, govern, and possess it in power. Now this, if we were to take the same example of the bicycle learning or riding a scooter or car or whatever skill one develops, having gone through this samjnana and prajnana and samjnana process, what are you trying to do? At some point, you are trying to hold, dwelling on the whole experience, you are trying to hold it until you govern it and possess it and master it. It becomes for you an instrument, an extension of yourself. Your consciousness is Lord. That is an instrument. At some point, when you've got it to that stage, the bicycle is felt as an extension of your own body. You can do with it what you like. You can twist it, shape it, turn it around, spin the wheel around, do whatever you like. You don't even have to think about it consciously. And there is a sense of mastery, possession in power of expression, as distinct from knowledge. So you see, the knowledge is leading to the power. First, you're aware. In consciousness, you have an identity. And as the identity in consciousness becomes more and more complete and detailed, there is the seizing and possessing where you can wield it by action of power. And the full mastery, the holding, governing, possessing, and power is the ajnana process. Now, in all active consciousness, all four are necessary. The first of these gives the comprehensive knowledge. The last of these gives the comprehensive power. And in between are the two things in which you have both the play of knowledge and power, but there is a distinction, there is a separation. The object is separate from you, you're reaching out to grasp and then drawing in to complete the grasping. So these are the four functions for any active consciousness. In the synthesis of yoga, Sri Aurobindo deals with these in a very different way, discussing the supramental sense. How does the supramental consciousness experience sensations? Because, of course, it also does. It is not a blank consciousness. And these four operations he describes there in a way which is native to the supermind. We can briefly read this just to get a sense of how they operate on that level. And then we will continue here, because in the next paragraph, Sri Aurobindo discusses what our mind is currently able to do and what it is not able to do, which the supermind is able to do. So we'll understand that better once we have read this. So I come to the chapter in the synthesis of yoga called the supramental sense. It is among the last few chapters. As there is a supramental thought and essential consciousness, so too there is a supramental sense. Sense is fundamentally not the action of certain physical organs, but the contact of consciousness with its objects. Samjnana. So this is the first term he has introduced, contact of consciousness with its objects. When the consciousness of the being is withdrawn wholly into itself, it is aware only of itself, of its own being, its own consciousness, its own delight of existence, its own concentrated force of being, and of these things not in their forms, but in their essence. When it comes out of this self-immersion, it becomes aware of, or it releases or develops out of its self-immersion, its activities, the forms of being, of consciousness, of delight, and force. So here is the two conditions of consciousness. Consciousness dwelling internally on itself, and then coming out of self-immersion, it releases or develops all those possibilities. Then too, on the supramental plane, its primary awareness still remains of a kind native to and entirely characteristic of the self-awareness of the spirit. The knowledge of the one and infinite. Even after it comes out and draws out all these, it still holds this knowledge of one and infinite. It is a knowledge that knows all its objects, forms, and activities comprehensively by being aware of them in its own infinite self, intimately, by being aware of them as their self, absolutely, by being aware of them as one in self with its own being. So here's the difference. In mind, I can dwell on, I'm creating this novel, I visualize these different people, I identify with each of them, and then I draw out and objectivize them. When I objectivize, they are no more I. But in supermind, because the consciousness is all-inclusive, it is in oneness, even when it objectivizes, it is still felt as taking place in me. The closest equivalent is when, in my consciousness, I am narrating to myself the novel. I have not yet objectivized in book form events. So at that point, the whole visualization is taking place in me, and yet I have objectivized. So to supermind, this is how the whole world feels. All its other ways of knowledge are projected from this knowledge by identity, are parts or movements of it. So now, the activity which is nearest to this essential knowledge by identity is the large embracing consciousness, especially characteristic of the supramental energy, which takes into itself all truth and idea and object of knowledge and sees them at once in their essence, totality, and parts or aspects, Vijnana. So this is Vijnana, the way the supermind naturally sees and holds everything in the essential, in the totality, in the parts and aspects, in the oneness. Its movement is a total seeing and seizing. It is a comprehension and possession in the self of knowledge. I skip some lines. Another supramental activity puts the knowledge by identity more into the background and stresses more the objectivity of the thing known. Now imagine in your mind, you have created this novel, all these parts being played out. You see, in your mind, you can shift. You can shift to objectivize more the different parts and see it as if separate. Or you find, there's a problem in this. Immediately your mind enters, identifies with the character. How will he see this? What's the change I need to make in the sequence of what he speaks? And then I move out again and objectivize. So in the creative consciousness of your mind, you are able to identify with the parts or stand back and exaggerate the separation, push back the identity. There is still identity because it's all taking place in your mind out of your own creation. But you highlight, stress the objectivity, and put the identity in the background. Its characteristic movement, descending into the mind, becomes the source of the peculiar nature of our mental knowledge, intelligence, prajnana, putting in front, separating. And this is the activity of supermind which descends into the intellectual mentality where we experience this objectivization and separation. But in its origin, it is an action that the supermind can do. But for the supermind, it is a secondary action. The unity is the primary action. In the mind, the action of intelligence involves at the outset separation and otherness between the knower, knowledge, and the known. But in the supermind, its movement still takes place in the infinite identity, or at least in the cosmic oneness. Only the self of knowledge indulges the delight of putting the object of consciousness away from the more immediate nearness of the original and eternal unity, but always in itself, and of knowing it again in another way, so as to establish with it a variety of relations of interaction, which are so many minor chords in the harmony of the play of the consciousness. So you see, in the supermind, there's a delight in separating and putting away from oneself. So again, we take the analogy. You've created this protagonist, wonderful character, and you enjoy separating yourself from him, observing the different play and role, and trying out different combinations, and it all makes for variations of the delight. And then again, identifying with other parts and seeing this protagonist through the eyes of other parts, through all the relationships he has with his friends, with his enemies, and with the others. And this is the way the supermind enjoys the world and the experience of separation, but always knowing the unity underlying. So now he discusses some jnana. Well, there's a third movement. The movement of this supramental intelligence, prajnana, becomes a subordinate, a tertiary action of the supramental, for the fullness of which thought and word are needed. So for this, the moment you have put in separation, you need thought, you need word to complete it. Finally, the fourth action of the supramental knowledge completes the various possibilities. This still further accentuates the objectivity of the thing known, puts it away from the station of experiencing consciousness, and again brings it to nearness by uniting contact, effected either by direct nearness, touch, union, or less closely across the bridge or through the connecting stream of consciousness, of which there has already been mention. It is a contact of existence, presences, things, forms, forces, activities, but a contacting of them in the stuff of the supramental being and energy, not in the divisions of matter and through the physical instrumentations, that creates the sense, that creates the supramental sense, samjnana. So in the supramental sense, this drawing in is the samjnana, but it functions differently in the supramental consciousness as described here, in substance of supermind, whereas in mind it is other substance from which you have to as if extract the idea and identify with the substance of idea. So there is more of this which those who are interested can read. He discusses the relationships between these different workings. But we set it aside now and come back to the main text. Where now Sri Aurobindo is describing these four operations as they are in the current organization of human mentality. Meaning, it's not going to stay like that forever. And perhaps even that it was not so earlier in our own evolution when we were perhaps less developed intellectually. As our human psychology is constituted, we begin with samjnana, the sense of an object in its image. The apprehension of it in knowledge follows. So we see an object in its image, we dwell on it as if we are holding it in its substance, trying to feel. And then we as if draw out from it the meaning, the apprehension. Afterwards, we try to arrive at the comprehension of it in knowledge and the possession of it in power. And so in dwelling like this, we try to get the full picture, and with the full picture, the full awareness, the full mastery. All that follows later. So at first, it is dwelling in the sense of an object in its image. There are secret operations in us, in our subconscious and superconscious selves, which precede this action. By this action, he means what we do afterwards to arrive at comprehension and knowledge and possession and power. And this is being done by secret operations in our subconscious and superconscious selves. But of these secret operations, but of these we are not aware in our surface being. And therefore for us, they do not exist. If we knew of them, our whole conscious functioning would be changed. So this is really the secret of grasping comprehension of knowledge and possession and power. And the secret is this, that the means by which we do it is not currently in our conscious awareness. It is happening at a subconscious or a superconscious level, and we are not aware how it happens, by what it happens. If we could become aware of them, then of course we would open to those higher possibilities. But right now we are not aware. So what do we do? And the easiest thing we tend to do to activate those secret operations, we go to sleep. We think of other things. We turn our mind away and allow something internal to do its stuff uninterrupted by our conscious activity. So you notice, you take a book, you study your subject, you read, you try to analyze, synthesize, look in various ways, somehow try to get the grip of the thing itself. What are they really talking about? And then suddenly click, now I get it. That's what they're trying to say. The in-between click took place, I'm not conscious where and how, but it happened. When it happens, it dawns, now I'm one with the idea. But sometimes it does not happen. And I say, this is really a tough one. I put it away, close the book. And perhaps my mind is tired, so I will just go and do some mechanical work, or it's night, I go to sleep. I wake up next morning, I pick up the same text and I read again. Oh yes, this is what they're trying to explain. It's obvious. So the thing of click happening can happen when we are awake, but still it happens behind a screen. Or we go to sleep, or we turn away, we chat with somebody, we come back, and it has happened. And that operation has taken place inside. He uses two words, subconscious and superconscious. When both levels have their operation, the subconscious operation is often at a level where we have grasped it without conscious awareness. For example, a skill you're trying to develop. Suppose you want to learn juggling. You take 2 balls or 3 balls and you try to catch and move and synchronize. At first, you have this analytic mind using the power of prajnana and samjnana. The ball is separate, I have to time the hand to catch it, and the whole prajnana operation is in front. And then somewhere along the way, I, as if grasp, I draw into myself and identify and absorb, the samjnana operation begins to happen. But still, I have to be very conscious and vigilant. And then I finished my training today, and generally this happens after sleep. After a nap, I come back, I pick it up again, and oh, now it's happening automatically. I'm watching my hands do it. The prajnana function is even separated from my hands. My hands are doing it. It's got absorbed in the body consciousness. And this took place in a subconscious level. The body identified and absorbed and caught it. And so subconscious absorptions take place often when it deals with knowledge which needs to be acquired at levels which are not rational, not intellectual, or above intellect. But the superconscious absorption takes place at more high operations, either intuitive or pure conceptual ideas. When we have to deal with a new concept, which is not habitual to us, after a nap you come back and now it's obvious and it is illumined, it's lit up in some higher part of the mind. So those are often things which have taken place at a superconscious level. So there are secret operations in us, in our subconscious and superconscious selves, which precede this action. But of these we are not aware in our surface being, and therefore for us they do not exist. If we knew of them, our whole conscious functioning would be changed. As it is, what happens is a rapid process by which we sense an image and have of it an apprehensive percept and concept, and a slower process of the intellect by which we try to comprehend and possess it. The former process is the natural action of the mind which has entirely developed in us. The latter is an acquired action, an action of the intellect and the intelligent will, which represent in mind an attempt of the mental being to do what can only be done with perfect spontaneity and mastery by something higher than mind. So here comes the distinction of what mind can do and what it cannot do. Right now in our current organization of mind, these two powers, prajnana and samjnana, are spontaneous because they are fully developed. The other powers of vijnana and ajnana are not developed in mind, and so intellect has to fill in for those by some awkward, long, roundabout process. So we observe carefully what he's saying. What happens is a rapid process by which we sense an image and have of it an apprehensive percept and concept. So the first level, there's an image which is acquired rapidly, and there is an apprehension, a drawing in, a taking in, percept and concept. Now these two words again are important to recognize. Percept is what one sees through the senses in an objectivized form. Concept is the idea of it which we hold in essence. So I observe the apple falling. My perception is that there is something which is pushing the apple down or pulling it down. The concept behind is the concept of gravity. My perception may be wrong because it involves a taking in through the senses an idea of things. I see the apple fall and I assume somebody sitting in the tree has thrown it down. That is a percept. The perception involves and trying to understand something from outside, perceiving it through senses and making sense of it. Conception is the principal idea behind that somebody can be hiding, that there is perhaps a force which is pushing or pulling, gravity, whatever form it may take. So, by this process of percept and then concept, so the percept is more naturally part of prajnana, the thing of reaching out in separation. By these processes, very quickly we sense the image and we grasp something. So I see the apple fall and something in me knows. Now a little baby in whom the intelligence has not yet become self-aware, does not know vocabulary of gravity, does not have consciously a concept that there is such a thing as gravity, that things should fall. He still senses and knows what the thing is. If an apple falls, it's normal. If it falls up, he's surprised. Now, who taught it that the nature of reality is that things should fall down and not fall up? So they do this experiment with babies. They, for example, create an optical illusion. Against a wall, they make an object seem to be floating. Of course, behind there's something attached which is supporting it. The child sees this object floating. He looks at it and he looks around. Something is wrong. And then if he does not get an immediate response, he starts crying. And we are able to show by such experiments that even newborn children who have barely an experience of the material reality, they have some concept of what things should be like. And when the things don't fit right, they feel weird, they feel awkward, and they're struggling to make sense of it. So this is something which has happened automatically on the first level, an experience, and we have grasped something of it already. It's a part of us. Then comes the process, slower process of the intellect by which we try to comprehend and possess. Why is it happening like this? What is the principle behind it? What makes it go this way and not some other way? How can I use it? How can I make it a part of myself? How can I master this activity? And this is where the intellect now starts trying to understand, to comprehend, and then to take control and possession of the situation. Let's say, again, to take the example of the bicycle, you're sitting on the cycle, and one of the tricks we do to get somebody to catch it quickly, we don't explain too much. We say, sit down, hold the handle. And the person holds from behind and says, now just turn the pedals. And the person keeps the balance from behind. And after a while, I am very comfortable and I stop trying. And before I know it, the person at the back has left it. And I'm going ahead and I'm talking to him, and suddenly I realize he's no more there. Hey, where are you? And boom, I fall. But I've got to the point where I've got the experience, and now I know I can do it. I don't know how I did it, but I know I can do it. And the less I try to do it, the more easily it seems to happen. So I get it to the point. Generally, within a day or two, we can get to the point of balance. But I don't know how to get up and get off. I don't know how to start without losing balance. At that point, you'll see the other two functions begin to kick in. I'm now trying to gain the comprehension and the power. How did I do the balancing? How did I manage this? And how can I now be fully expertise? How can I have a full expertise in it? Until I stop thinking, stop bothering, and it becomes a part of me. At that point, I'm struggling, I'm trying to gain a certain mastery. So as it is, what happens is a rapid process by which we sense an image and have of it an apprehensive percept and concept, and a slower process of the intellect by which we try to comprehend and possess it. The former process is the natural action of the mind which has entirely developed in us. So this initial process involving prajnana and samjnana has already developed in us as part of the mental evolution, because these are functions natural to the mind, which is an instrument of division. Both prajnana and samjnana involve separative knowledge. In the first, there's a grasping of something separate. In the other, there is a drawing on possessing in substance, but in otherness, in possession. Whereas the essential character of vijnana is an identity, holding in essence and parts and properties all at the same time. Similarly, the essence of ajnana is the holding in governing power, possession, where you are identified in power. So both of these are not natural to our mind, and especially the intellect, which are functioning in a divided consciousness. And so he says the former process is the natural action of the mind which has entirely developed in us. The latter is an acquired action, an action of the intellect and the intelligent will, which represent in mind an attempt of the mental being to do what can only be done with perfect spontaneity and mastery by something higher than mind. So the action of the intellect and intelligent will is trying to replicate what supermind would do by analyzing, by going through process of analytics, synthetic, moving back and forth, trying out, getting a full picture and getting mastery. Supermind would do the same thing, take the thing and straight away would know in identity and in mastery in the identity. That's it. As spontaneously as in the first action, our mind caught the idea just like that. But after that, the intellect and intelligent will are playing this role of replicating what supermind would do, but now in a substance normal. And so they have to go through a process of back and forth. Now, if you observe how we do it, how do we get the full grasping by an intellectual process of the intelligent will? Try to know it thoroughly in all its parts, from all perspectives, from all angles. So if, for example, we are being taught to write a good novel or write a good script, we look at this character and look at it from all angles. What are his likes? What are his dislikes? What are the flaws of the character? How does he respond in certain types of situations? What is the childhood event which most influences his behavior in adulthood? We literally go through all that, whether we will use it or not. Then I know the character fully. Now, as the story unfolds, all those details naturally begin to pop up because I have gone through it totally. If I am the captain of a ship, it is a requirement in the Navy that you must know the ship in and out in all its parts and all its functions. Only then you can be captain. So the first thing you're given when you have to take your ship, you're given this whole pile of manuals. And you go through each page and describe each thing in detail. Not only a captain, subsequently all the officers have to do that, because you never know what will be your responsibility in time of crisis. In time of crisis, everybody else has died and you may be alone in the engine room, or you may be alone in the radio section. You must know everything thoroughly. And it is part of the examination before you can enter the ship to know it all, down to the specifications, sizes, functions, operations. And you notice what happens when you have done that. When you approach the ship, even before you have met the ship physically, something inside you knows the ship. And you look at the ship and your consciousness reaches out and grasps it all. Oh yes, I know everything in the boiler room even before having seen it. I enter the boiler room, it's all familiar. Oh yes, this is what I had studied, this is what I know, except now it's just falling into place quickly. And suddenly the identification is complete. I am one with the ship. Then I can truly use it. So the method the intellect uses to gain that kind of comprehensive character of the Vijnana, get all the pieces from all angles, put it all together and assemble it, and somehow an identification takes place. But it is an attempt of the mental being to do what can only be done with perfect spontaneity and mastery by something higher than mind. And in that higher than mind consciousness, it will look at the bicycle, sit on it, feel how the bicycle feels, and then start pedaling and flow with the bicycle's truth and spontaneously get the balance and do exactly whatever is needed. That would be spontaneous for supermind. The intellect and intelligent will. Now, these are the two things which have been trying to replicate what supermind does. Form a bridge by which the mental being is trying to establish a conscious connection with the supramental and to prepare the embodied soul for the descent into it of a supramental action. You see how important the intelligent will and the intellect is. It is by these that we prepare the mind for something which will descend from above and do the same thing spontaneously. But in activating the mind using the intelligent will and the intellect, I'm preparing the grounds in the mind for the supermind to enter and take charge. How is it doing that? Each time I do this analysis, synthesis, all the struggle of understanding and trying to get a full picture, I am making my mental substance plastic, multifaceted, supple enough that when something comes, it can flow to see from all sides. It can absorb to get a comprehensive picture. Although initially constructed in comprehension, as close as it can come to comprehension, the substance of the mind is becoming more ready to receive the action of supermind. Otherwise, it will be as if the hand is stuck into clay and then tries to do things. It's jammed because the clay is rigid. But if in the clay you have put water and you've kneaded it until it becomes soft and pliable, then you can put your hand in it and now you can shape the clay from inside. So it is with our intellect, with the power of the mental consciousness. The intellect and the struggle of the intellect to understand the world and master the world is kneading the substance of the mind. And each time it fails, each time it is unable to, it is intuitively, spontaneously turning upwards to receive some insight, some help from above. And a little flash of light, a little flash of intuition comes, leads, prepares, until all of this one day is sufficiently made clear and ready that it can just turn up and the reflected light of supermind, reflected through intuition, can simply fill in and see and prepare the ground for the full entry of the supramental consciousness. And then these actions will be spontaneous, automatic, the full grasping in knowledge and power. But this is the link point, a bridge which is being formed. And you see why in evolution, in transition from one level to another, there has always to be some part of the lower which reaches upwards. It can never make the breakthrough. But in reaching upwards, it creates a link, a bridge. At the same time, from above, something descends downwards. And it is intuition, which is the descending part of the supermind, which touches this. And there's a point of contact. Where the contact takes place, the true evolution is taking place. Both something ascending and something descending and joining together. And finally, when there is a full readiness, the thing from above can flow down. Therefore, he says, because it is still in this level, partly developed, and intellect is and intelligent will are forming a bridge for preparing for something higher. Therefore, the first process is comparatively easy, spontaneous, rapid, perfect. So I look at the fish swimming in the aquarium, I see it struggling. I know it is sick. I know some intervention is required. What intervention? Now the intellect has to kick in. Is it this? Is it that? Could it be the other? The second process, slow, labored, imperfect. But the first sight, I know it is sick. What to do about it? Slow, labored, imperfect. In supermind, it would be instant. So just as a quick example, We were told by Vishwanath had made a design. It was all very nice. Now the engineers had to develop the pillars and the structures which would hold this design. And they were having a problem. There was a large portion where there was no support structure, and they couldn't find a way to hold the load without putting somewhere a pillar. And whatever they tried, they couldn't find an answer without breaking the architect's original design. So finally he said, I gave up. I went to the mother and I said, Mother, I'm not able to solve this problem. So mother said, bring me the drawings. So the drawings were placed before her. She took a pen and marked a spot and said, put a pillar here. So Vishwanatha says he went back and did his calculations and he found it solved all the problems. So he was stunned. He came back to the mother and said, Mother, how did you know? You don't have training in engineering. She said, I just looked at it and it was obvious. This was it. In the same way, when Lalji Bhai created the sugar factory, mother was experimenting to see how nature would collaborate in the work. And so it was on a piece of land. They needed huge amounts of water for sugar processing. Without water, it would be impossible. So they dug once, they didn't get enough water. They dug another, they didn't get enough water. All the conventional methods had failed, and they were spending a lot of money. It seemed almost as if there was not a possibility of water in the land. And then when they reported this to the mother, she asked for the land drawings. When the drawing was placed before her, she took a pen and marked a spot and said, dig here. They went back and Lalji Bhai told us this. They dug through, they hit water which is gushing, and then not on one level but 2 or 3 levels gushing water, which to this day, that is when we did the interview, which was at least 20 or 30 years later, he said the pressure of the water is such we don't even have to pump, it just rushes up. That's the kind of water. How did she know? Just look at it and it's obvious. So this is the functioning of the Vijnana and Ajnana powers, which are natural to supermind. And when they enter the functioning of the mind, the second process, which is slow, labored, and imperfect, will also become spontaneous. So he says, in proportion as the intellectual action becomes associated with and dominated by a rudimentary supramental action, and it is this which constitutes the phenomenon of genius, the second process also becomes more and more easy, spontaneous, rapid, and perfect. So what is the key? The intellectual action has to become associated with and dominated by a rudimentary supramental action. Something of the supramental action must dominate or become associated with the intellectual action. So there are methods by which we can associate, which may lead eventually to a domination. But as we are able to do this, this second process becomes more and more easy, spontaneous, rapid, and perfect. 4 stages. First, it becomes easy. I'm thinking, oh yes, I get it easily now. Spontaneous. I don't even need to think. I turn my mind to know, and poop, spontaneously I know. Third, rapid. The whole thing, which would be a series of spontaneous insights, becomes now, and oh yes, I have the full picture. It becomes rapid. And even when it's rapid, there may be flaws, there may be limitations, things missed, things skipped, inaccuracies, slight distortions. All these will fade away in the final stage of perfection when the supermind acts directly. But he says, this process of becoming associated and dominated by some influence from above, it is this which constitutes the phenomenon of genius. Genius is nothing but the higher faculties, which are not yet organized in the mind, leaking in, influencing, and associating with the current intellectual functionings. That's all there is to genius. So all of us potentially can develop genius. And Sri Aurobindo says famously in one of his letters, your intelligence does not grow by studying more. He says it develops by awakening to the psychic influence and the awakening of intuition. It is by this that your intelligence will develop. and one can train it. I said there are methods to associate with a higher action. The first step for training to associate is train the intelligence to become silent and then to open up. That's how you create the base for associating. And then you receive the action from above in the silence. And then an alignment gradually develops. By habit, a familiarity develops. In aspiration, and plop, the intuition comes. And you catch the movement of the intuition and flow with it. So that's the kind of training which Sri Aurobindo discusses in the Synthesis of Yoga. We don't need to dwell upon it more because it's something we have discussed many times. But as this faculty of intuition begins to act more and more, our mind becomes capable of what is normally described as genius. And it is not such a big thing. We have seen people in the ashram who were, in terms of intelligence, below ordinary. And Sri Aurobindo points out how by the action of the yoga force, they are expressing genius potential in poetry, in art, in music, and even in science and engineering. All of these are possible by yoga. And this is the whole point of the yoga. But we now understand the relationship between the higher and the lower ranges of consciousness, mind of our mind, which is supermind, and the inferior operation of the intellectual mind, the link between the two of the intellect and the intelligent will, the conscious self-aware will, and the possibility of linking this with some influence from above, which awakens the genius potential in us, but eventually preparing for a full expression of the higher power of the supermind. So this is where we will pause. He discusses what will complete the Vijnana and Ajnana functioning, which we will see next time. And that will be beginning from 15th of July that we will resume these classes. In between, for those who are interested, we will be showing videos of other classes as well as other recordings of perhaps some of the lectures which I will have while traveling abroad, which I will make available online. For those who are watching online, it will be on the same channel. And on Tuesday is Panditji's birthday. You're all invited to drop in any time during the day to partake of prasad, but especially in the morning at 6 o'clock when we will have the prayer. And on the eve of the birthday, that is tomorrow evening at 6:30, we will show one of his talks on the video, followed by a meditation. You're all welcome. And we continue this text after a month. These four, therefore, are the basis of all conscious action. Four faculties which properly belonging to the supermind, partly developed in mind, but all action of consciousness rests on these four. It's such a deep insight and such a deep psychology which is revealed here, the roots of which we find in the Vedic texts. But even in the Vedic text, the full sense of these four powers is not obvious unless one has Sri Aurobindo as a guide to reveal these to us.